Benningfield group. Let's get on to Russ.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Chris. That was awesome. So I'm gonna change the pace a little bit and talk more. We're gonna kind of get technical on you here. The Energy Code treats electric and gas in a certain way, and up until recently, the big thing that prevented somebody from building an all-electric house was the water heater. Okay, and because when you say electric water heater, you meant an electric resistance water heater, and they're very efficient, but they use a ton of electricity. And there's a new technology that's actually been around for a long time on the space heating side, but until recently, it's gotten more market-driven, more viable on the water heating side. So I thought we'd kind of talk about that, kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about when we say heat pump water heaters. So that's basically what this talk is about. Oh, I forget this. Okay. Is this one working? Okay. All right. So Title 24, Part 6, the Energy Code, is required to look at the economic side of energy consumption. So it looks at the cost. In fact, it's the only building code that before they adopt a part of the code, they have to first prove that it's cost effective, that it saves the same amount of energy that it uses, and it has a certain payback period to it. Okay, that's a very interesting part of the Energy Code. So when you think about that, that starts to affect the way we look at energy savings and energy consumption and switching types of systems that we have in the home and things like that. So the two things we're talking about, the energy consumption, is electricity and gas. Okay, electricity is kilowatt hours, gas is therms or gallons if you're talking about propane and stuff like that. But they can both be converted to the same unit, which is basically a BTU-based unit, British thermal unit. So it's a unit of heat. Okay, and just to give you an idea of what a BTU is, one kitchen match, a wooden kitchen match, if you strike it and let it burn all the way down, you've just released 1 BTU of energy, of heat. Okay. So when you start talking about an air conditioner that has a cooling capacity of 40,000 BTUs per hour, that means it can remove 40,000 kitchen matches worth of heat from a house in an hour. Okay, and when you remove heat from something, you cool it. When you add heat to something, you heat it up. When you add BTUs, you heat it up. Okay, so when you take electricity and gas and convert it all the way down to the same unit, which is BTUs, you find that electricity on a BTU by BTU basis is about 3 times more expensive. And that has to do with the generation costs and the transmission costs, getting it from the power plant to the house and things like that. And that there's something called a source energy multiplier built into the Energy Code that multiplies electric use by 3 when you start looking at reducing energy and things like that. So basically, a unit of electricity is 3 times more expensive than a unit of gas. Okay? So that's a big hurdle that we have to get over when we start talking about the Energy Code. Efficiency, when you talk about the efficiency of a heater, okay, it's what you put in, it's what you get out divided by what you put in. So what we're getting out is heat. We want heat, BTUs. What we're putting in is either gas or electricity. Okay, and when you convert that to BTUs in divided by BTUs out, you get efficiency. And for a gas water heater, for example, you are burning gas. Gas can be converted to BTUs. Okay, you're burning gas, so you're putting gas in to heat water. But hot water sits there all day, it loses heat to the outside, so you got to heat it up some more. Plus, be very careful about this, but when your gas water heater at home is running, go put your hand up next to the V vent. Don't touch it, it might be hot, but you'll feel a lot of heat coming out that's not going into the water. So that's the losses that happen. So that's why we have efficiencies less than 100% for gas water heaters, because some of it gets lost. So we're putting in more than we're getting out. So that number, the BTUs out, is a smaller number than the BTUs in, so efficiency is less than 100% typically, okay? Now, electric resistance water heaters are way more efficient, because what happens is you pass a current through an element and it creates resistance to the electricity passing through it, and that gives off heat. So the best example of an electric resistance element is if you look inside a toaster, when you turn it on, you see those things glowing red. That's resistance electric heat. It's very efficient, but the problem is the units that you're putting in are very expensive, okay? Even though you're getting a lot out for what you put in. So electric resistance heaters are way more efficient than gas, but they still cost more to operate, okay? So that's a hurdle that we have to overcome. Orange juice isn't cutting it. It's going to be a bad allergy season for everybody. If you haven't noticed already. Usually it doesn't start till May for me. So, now I drink it wrong. So electric resistance heaters are about 100% efficient. Let's just say they're 100% efficient. Not exactly, but they're close. Makes the math easier if you can say they're 100% efficient. Essentially, all the electricity is converted into heat, okay? Now comes along heat pump water heaters. They have efficiencies that are 2 to 3 times more than electric resistance, okay? That means they're more than 100% efficient. How can that possibly be? How can you get more out than what you put in? Okay, well, to be honest, heat pumps are cheating a little bit, okay? They're not creating the heat, they're stealing it from somewhere else, all right? So realize that when we burn gas, we're creating BTUs, all right? We burn the gas combusts and it gives off heat. When we use an electric resistance heater, we consume electricity, we create BTUs. So both electric resistance and gas are creating BTUs. Now heat pumps are very different. They don't create BTUs, they move BTUs from one place to another. So the BTUs already exist, they just gather them up, they condense them down, and they stick them in the water, okay? And you can do that for a lot less electricity than actually creating the BTUs from scratch. So everything in the world has some BTUs in it, okay? The only place that has no BTUs is outer space, right? Absolute zero. So even a cube of ice has some BTUs in it. It just has a lot less BTUs than, say, a glass of water, okay? So, all right, I need you to brace yourself. I'm going to hit you with some thermodynamics, and if you're not braced for that, it's kind of a gut punch to the brain sometimes. The warmer an object is, say this glass of water, the warmer that is, the more BTUs it has in it, okay? If you add BTUs, it gets hotter. If you take BTUs out, it gets colder, okay? The warmer an object is, the more dense the BTUs are in there, and the easier it is to take them out, okay? I mentioned cooling an object, heating an object. Okay, here we go. So, the first principle is that BTUs will move automatically from a warmer object to a colder object. Okay, very intuitive, makes perfect sense. Let's say you take a block of metal that has a lot of BTUs, represented by the little kitchen matches there, and you put it up against another block of metal that has fewer BTUs. The BTUs will go from the warmer one to the colder one. And then, as they move across, a point occurs where there's the same amount of BTUs on both sides, and then the heat movement stops. They reach equilibrium, and they stop. Okay, so that's the bottom line. So that's an important concept. Okay, hold on to that. Another thermodynamic principle is very interesting. If you take a compressible gas, okay, that has a certain number of BTUs in it, and you compress that gas to a smaller volume, the BTUs are more dense. okay? And when the BTUs are more dense, they're hotter. So you heat gas by compressing it into a smaller space because the BTUs are more dense. The same thing happens in reverse. If you take a gas with a certain number of BTUs and you expand it, the BTUs are less dense and it gets cold. Okay, so now we can adjust the temperature of something by compressing and expanding it. Okay? So take those two principles, the fact that heat automatically goes from a warmer to a colder all by itself, and then the principle of changing the temperature of something by expanding it and compressing it. So let's say we have this canister with a gas in it, and it's in a room that's 70 degrees, okay? And we expand that gas, the gas becomes 40 degrees. The BTUs from the space, the 70-degree air, will go into the canister all by themselves, okay? And then if we compress that gas until it's hotter than the room temperature, the BTUs come out, okay? So expansion, compression, so that's very much like a sponge, okay? Where the water is the heat, okay? And when you squeeze it out, the BTUs come out. When you expand it, it absorbs the BTUs. So now we have a heat sponge. So now let's say we create this fancy gadget that's spinning in this direction. You can see the arrows there, okay? So at the bottom, it's expanding and grabbing the water, coming up and squeezing it out, and just continues to do that. So the water represents heat, the height of the water represents temperature. So we're taking BTUs from a lower temperature to a higher temperature. All right, so when we want to heat our house, we've got a warm house and it's cold outside. The BTUs are naturally wanting to go from a warmer to a colder space, so they're escaping. So we can calculate that. That's called a heating load calculation. How many BTUs are escaping in an hour when it's a certain temperature inside and a certain temperature outside? Well, we want to replace those BTUs, and what a heat pump does is it gathers BTUs from the cold outside air and brings them into the warmer house through this expansion and contraction. So this BTU sponge goes outside, absorbs BTUs from the cold space, brings it inside, condenses them until they're hotter than the indoor space, and they come out. All right, so that's how space heating for a heat pump. So back to the efficiency concept then. For an electric resistance water heater at the top there, so it's an electric resistance water heater or a space heater, either one. For every 5 electric BTUs you put into it, you get about 5 out. It's 100% efficient. Okay? So that's the 100% efficient electric resistance. Now the interesting thing about heat pumps is roughly for every 2 units of electric heat that goes in, it's actually stealing BTUs from the air, 5 of them, and putting them into the house. So for every 2, you get 5 out. That's how you get efficiencies higher than 100%. Okay? Now we can start competing with the fuel that's 3 times more expensive if we can have a system that's 3 times more efficient. Okay? So space heating, heat pump space heating has been around for a long time. That's not a big deal. If you wanted to build an all-electric house, you pretty much had to have heat pump space heating. Most of California is a cooling-dominated climate, so you also want air conditioning. The interesting thing about a heat pump is it's an air conditioner that runs backwards. Okay, so it air conditions in the summertime, a little valve switches, and it starts, so it's pumping heat out of the house in the summertime, little valve switches, pumps heat into the house during the wintertime. Okay, they work very well. Like I mentioned before, up until recently, when you said electric water heater, you meant an electric resistance water heater. And it was very, very difficult to get a house to comply to the energy code with an electric resistance water heater. Well, now we have an option, okay? And I wasn't quite sure how much of the code Chris was going to go into, so I didn't really put it in my slide, but if you're going to retrofit a house, take out a gas water heater and put in a heat pump water heater, the code says that that heat pump water heater has to be a certain efficiency. And the magic number right now is 2.8 for times on 12 where I live. I'm not sure what it is here. Is it higher or lower?
2.75.
2.75, thank you. So that's the efficiency of a water heater, a heat pump water heater that's equivalent to gas, because that's what the Energy Commission says. If you want to change something out, it has to be equal to or competitive to what the base case is which at this time is gas. All right, let's see. So the very high efficiencies of heat pump water heaters make them comparable to gas. And that gets back to the 3 times multiplier. Some efficiencies, for example, gas storage, water heaters, typical gas storage, 50 gallon like you see in most homes, have what's called an energy factor. It's an efficiency. Okay? Energy factor of 0.59 up to 0.69 and up. They go higher than that, but that's a very common range for most of the ones that you can see at Home Depot and stuff. Tankless water heaters are much more efficient because they don't have standby losses. They only heat the water as you need them, whereas a gas storage water heater, right now in your house there's very hot water just sitting there being reheated. Every time you cool it down it gets reheated, so that's why you get a much lower overall efficiencies on these compared to tankless. Okay? And then electric resistance between 0.95 and 0.99, but let's say around 99%. Heat pump water heaters. Now, we're on the other side of the decimal, okay? Up until this point, everything was less than 1. And now heat pumps are at 2 to 3.4 and higher. They're going up to 3.6, 3.8 now. And all we needed to be was 3 times more than this number to compete, and we certainly get there, okay? So heat pump water heaters, very competitive to gas, plus they have some other advantages. One that I don't have in my slide but was mentioned earlier is their ability to essentially act like a battery. Okay, you can heat the water during, and this is great during time of use rates that SMUD is, actually I put most of this presentation together as part of a SMUD training we did. SMUD's going to time of use pretty soon. SMUD's the utility in Sacramento, by the way. Heat pump water heaters are a big part of the time of use thing because you can heat the water during cheaper rates and store it and save it by having a very well-insulated water heater and then use the water whenever you want to, but maybe when the rates are higher. Okay? And you can also use them as a battery and charge them up, so to speak, by heating up the water. The water stays hot. Water is very dense. It holds a lot of BTUs. Okay? So you can keep it for a long time. Let's see. Then I mentioned time of use rates. There we go. All right, so very efficient compared to electric resistance. So some of the other advantages, they're environmentally friendly. There's no fossil fuels, so there's no fracking, drilling, pipelines, all that kind of stuff. No carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide given off. And they can be powered by renewable energy. Some very important safety aspects. No gas lines coming into the house, no gas leaks, no flammable stuff coming into the garage, no potential for explosions in the garage. No carbon monoxide, and no venting or roof penetrations in the home are needed for these. Some disadvantages. They're expensive. Compared to a basic gas water heater, especially compared to an electric resistance water heater, they're very expensive pieces of equipment. And I'll give you an example in just a minute. They're what's called their first hour delivery. One of the ratings on a water heater is its ability to provide hot water in the first hour after you start drawing it down. So you have a water heater that's full of hot water, you start taking showers and stuff, and it starts drawing that down. How much hot water will it put off in an hour? Will it give off in an hour? Compared to other types of water heaters, these are fairly low. Okay, so there's a potential for some performance issues, and when we start talking about cold showers, people get really upset. Okay, and they don't care how much their energy bill is. They're not going to take a cold shower. But you can compensate with larger tank sizes. Okay, so you just have more hot water to start with, and you have more to draw down from. Okay, so typically, just to kind of give you an idea, and Chris mentioned this when we talked about the size of water heaters. If you have a 50-gallon water heater and that's suiting you fine, and you want to switch to a heat pump, you probably want to go to an 80-gallon heat pump water heater. That's just kind of a typical range there. And that's for a good-sized family, by the way. That's not a family of 2. A family of 2 or 3 can, a 50-gallon heat pump water heater will work just fine. Let's see. The storage capacities are generally larger, so they require more space, and that's to offset the slower recovery rates. They require an adequate volume of air. Okay, so the BTUs are coming from the air, so you have to continuously provide it air that's as warm as possible so it can get those BTUs out. Now, one of the interesting side benefits of a heat pump water heater is it's cooling the air. It's taking BTUs out of the air. So warm air comes in, cold air comes out as a byproduct from a heat pump water heater. So that's great if you live in like Sacramento and your water heater's in the garage, it'll cool your garage. Okay, that's awesome. But if you're putting it inside your house and all you have is a closet, you put it in a closet, pretty soon that closet gets so cold it can no longer take BTUs out of that air, and the efficiency and capacity goes way down. So you do have to be very aware of that. But garage locations are ideal for heat pump water heaters. Closets, not so much. Okay, I talked to a Bradford White representative the other day, and he said their product is approved for closets if the closet door is fully louvered, top to bottom. Okay, and louvered doesn't mean a grill and a grill. It means fully louvered all the way up. Okay, and so what that does is it allows natural convection to happen and it kind of replenishes itself. Now, in a polar climate, you're giving off cold air, so now you're fighting the heat, the space heating system. So you got to be aware of that too. So they can be put into a closet. You have to take some of those into consideration. Garages in hot climates are ideal. There's a couple manufacturers that you can actually duct the air out of the attic through the unit and back up into the attic, so it blows cold air into your attic. That's awesome on a hot day. So there's some really cool things coming down the road. Let's see here. Here's just an example. Just grab this. It took me 5 minutes to grab this off of a website from a big box store. So this is a high-end unit. It's greater than 3 energy factor. It's perfect for a family size of 4 to 6 people. By the way, teenagers count for 2 people. So, I have 2 boys, and I consider myself a family of 6 when it comes to hot water use, that's for sure. They're 240 volts, which, by the way, can be an issue if you're switching from gas to heat pump. You have to run power to that. Most water heaters don't have power anywhere near out in the garage. So you got to bring in an electrical contractor. You got to look at the panel in the house, make sure it's appropriate for that. Okay. So 50-gallon retail, not on sale or anything, is about $1,400. 80 gallons, about $1,900. That's pretty expensive. Okay. Just so you know, SMUD's giving a $1,500 rebate if you switch from gas to heat pump. That more than pays for it. And I've seen these on sale where the 50 was about $1,000 and the 80 was about $1,200. They go on sale every now at the big box stores. Okay. So that $1,500 rebate pretty much covers the cost of the equipment. Then you have installation charges and things like that on top. How many doing on time?
2 minutes.
So some of the selling points, you can capitalize on a growing market share driven by improved technology, growing consumer awareness and demand, constant move towards energy efficiency, and doing your part to help reduce carbon footprint, and then of course the nerd factor, right? These are Wi-Fi, a lot of these, most of these are Wi-Fi based, okay? And so you can control them with your smartphone. You can set the exact temperature to a decimal point. How many now know what their water heater is set to, what the temperature of your water is? And do you know what it is? Have you measured it?
127 at the tank, and at the tap it comes out at 101.
Awesome. How do you know that?
Measure it.
You measure? Okay, you do. Okay. Anybody else measures their water? Awesome. That's great. Most of you go look at your water heater and look for degrees. You probably won't find it. You'll see hot, kind of hot, medium hot, sort of hot, or you'll see an A, B, C, D, right? That's not temperature. Now, what if you had that control? What if you could look at your smartphone and say, okay, today's a regular day. I got myself and a few other people taking a shower this morning, and it seemed okay, but it was a little cold, so I'm going to bump it up a degree. And then the next morning it goes, yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that was fine. I'm going to bump it down 1 degree just to see what happens. And you really fine tune it. You go, oh, I've got, the in-laws are coming next week. I better bump it up a couple degrees for the in-laws when they come over. Or my kids are coming home from college. I better bump it up like 10 degrees. Those kinds of things, that's knowledge. That's information that is what we need in order to achieve a zero net goal. Okay? Who would have thought that If somebody came out with a $250 thermostat and sold it at Home Depot, that people would race to Home Depot and empty the shelves of these $250 thermostats. That's happened. Nest's sales last year was $340 million for Nest thermostats. That's crazy, and that's to me, that's all driven by the nerd factor, is the desire to have that control and be able to. I've got a Wi-Fi, I have to confess. So, anyways, that's kind of what's going to happen with these heat pump water heaters too. Is people are going to start saying, "Oh, I know what the temperature of my water heater is," and they can change it, they can turn it down. Oh, I'm on vacation. Drop it down. Okay, that kind of stuff. So it's pretty cool stuff that's coming out. Any questions? That's about it for my presentation. So, all right, thanks.
I've heard that these heat pump water heaters can get quite loud. Is that an issue you run into?
They sound about like those little dorm room refrigerators. That's about what it sounds like. Yeah. So it's not super loud, but you wouldn't want to put it like in a closet right off the bedroom or anything like that. But they're not too bad. Yes, sir.
So you can talk about the space requirements, you can talk about the electricity requirements. So what about the cost of panel upgrade?
SMUD is saying it's going to be right between $400 and $700 to run a 220 circuit, about 20 feet inside of a garage and add a circuit for that. If your panel's already maxed out, then that's a pretty big box right there. Yeah, I had a circuit put in for an EV charger in my garage, and it was about $500. And it'd be the exact same thing.
Do you know who at SMUD led this work? I'm in the city of Palo Alto.
Yeah, Jim Mills.
Okay, because we did a cost effectiveness analysis on this and found that it's marginal to negative right now. Might be different in SMUD's territory.
Yeah, so going from gas to heat pump is considered a wash. But if you go on the DOE website and do some calculations and use 2.8 as your energy factor, you come out ahead. I think it drops from $450 to $380 a year or something like that when you go from gas. So that shows a savings. The Energy Commission considers 2.8 as a wash. SMUD's considering a wash. This is their Electrification carbon footprint reduction program, so it's not considered an energy savings reduction per se. But they have a $1,000 rebate if you go from a resistance electric to heat pump. And then there's that extra $500 is supposedly to cover the electrical